and welcome to another episode of Brightcast Transformers Talk. This is the second part of the Transformers movie timeline. This will cover the 1950s to 2007, right before the events of the first movie. This will encompass comics, movies, video games, and more. With that, let's get right down to it. 1950s. Bill Simmons proceeds to make quite a name for himself in Sector 7, not least of all by leading a campaign to have scientist Robert Oppenheimer discredited and ejected from the organization on allegations of communism. In 1953, Bill marries fellow agent Ann Fisher in a secret ceremony, and close to the end of the year, Ann becomes pregnant with their son, Seymour Simmons. Reginald Danco's grandson Joe, jealous of how his family has become sidelined in history in favor of the Simmons line, defects to the Communist Party. In February 1954, acting as an undercover agent, he sabotages the cooling system at Sector 7's Arctic base, planning to use the escape of Megatron to cover his theft of Sector 7 data and flight to Russia. Walter Simmons calls for liquid nitrogen bombs to be dropped on the facility to stop Megatron from falling out, at the expense of the lives of the base personnel, which includes his grandson Bill. This prompts Jetfire to intervene, but the Seeker proves only to save the lives of Ann Fisher and Philip Nolan. Unbeknownst to Sector 7, both Bill and Danco survive. Danco flees deeper into the tunnels, and Bill pursues, but Bill is captured by a Soviet extraction team who have come to recover Danco. He is taken back to Russia for interrogation and spends 8 years being moved from facility to facility, often escaping, always being recaptured, but never breaking under torture. The data stolen by Danco, meanwhile, allows the Soviets to finally utilize the technology taken from the captive Shockwave, and with it, they create the world's first nuclear power plant, the Obelisk Nuclear Power Plant, which is activated in June 1954. Seymour Simmons is born later in 1954. At Walter's wishes, Ann leaves Sector 7 in an effort to keep the child from ever learning of the legacy of obsession and death that has defined his family. Changes her name to Tova Simmons and opens a delicatessen, but Seymour proves to be every inch his father's son. As he grows older, he takes to sneaking out of the house, setting up a secret room in the basement of his mother's deli, where he studies the paranormal and develops an adherent belief in the presence of aliens on Earth. The Vietnam War begins in 1955. Philip Nolan and Thomas Kinner both serve in the conflict. 1960s. Sentinel Prime's Ark and the Longshot emerge from the space bridge in the vicinity of Earth in early 1961. The violently crash lands on Earth's moon, killing all on board save for Sentinel, who safely sealed the ship's crash vault. After examining the wreckage, Soundwave determined to keep the vessel out of the hands of the humans on the planet below, beginning with the removal of the space bridge pillars. The crash of the Ark is detected by both the United States and Soviet Union, and a space race begins to be the first to reach the moon and plunder the alien treasure. Incorrectly believing Bill Simmons can tell them something about the moon event and America's plans, the Soviets relocate their prisoner to holding facilities at Soviet Research Station October at the beginning of 1962. In 1963, the Soviet Union launches the space probe Luna 4, which captures images of the moon's surface, including the space bridge pillars, as the Decepticons are in the process of transporting them, prompting Soundwave to take action to conceal their movements. To this end, in 1964, the Decepticons' human-form Pretender operative infiltrates the Soviet space program by killing Spetsnaz agent Alyssa Morozov and adopting her appearance. That same year, the Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird jet makes its first flight. At an unknown point in time during the next 3 decades, one of the jets malfunctions and crashes on top of Jetfire while he is wandering through the desert, and he adopts its form. In the summer of 1965, as the Soviets launch the Luna 6 probe, the Pretender uses her Morozov disguise to penetrate Research Station October and massacre the scientists there, in order to prevent the relay of any data from the probe. Joe Danco also dies in the attack, but Bill Simmons is able to escape. In the process, the Pretender learns of the presence of 2 other Cybertronians on Earth, but without the knowledge that they are his leaders, Megatron and Shockwave. Soundwave disregards them as rumors and elects to focus on more important matters for the time being, making a deal with the sole surviving scientist, Volkshad, to curtail any subsequent Soviet investigations into the Ark. 2 months later, Bill Simmons successfully returns to the United States, but when he attempts to contact Sector 7, Soundwave zeroes in on his position and sends the pretender to take him out. Bill locates his wife's deli and meets Seymour Simmons for the first time, giving him contact information for Sector 7. He subsequently disappears in an explosion when the pretender attacks. Seymour goes on to make contact with Sector 7, meets his great-grandfather Walter, and grows up to join the organization of one of its most prestigious agents. The fate of Bill Simmons remains unknown. As a consequence of this escapade, Soundwave becomes aware of the existence of Sector 7. On July 16, 1969, NASA carries out the Apollo 11 mission, successfully sending astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to the Moon. A strategic 21-minute blackout is staged by Sector 7 at NASA Command to keep the true purpose of the moon landing a secret, and Walter Simmons directs the men in their investigation of the Ark. Simultaneously, Sector 7 also exploits the fact that the eyes of the entire world are focused on Apollo 11 to stage 2 additional concurrent operations. First, they initiate the test of their own spacecraft, the Ghost 1, created from Megatron's reverse-engineered Cybertronian technology and captured by Samuel Walker. Incorrectly believing that this craft is more important than Apollo 11, Soundwave focuses all his attentions on it, leaving him unable to stop Armstrong and Aldrin from exploring the Ark. The Ghost 1 is inadvertently sucked through a wormhole and deposited in a distant solar system, its arrival drawing the attentions of Optimus Prime's Autobots and Starscream's Decepticons. When the ship sets down on a barren planet, Starscream makes first contact with Walker and his crew and learns that Megatron and the Allspark are on Earth, then turns on the humans in order to keep this information from the other Decepticons, allying with Optimus Prime to survive the dangers of the alien world and also sharing the information with him. The crew of Ghost 1 give their lives to save the Autobot leader from Starscream. For the second operation, Sector 7 finally carry out the much-delayed move of Megatron from the Arctic to the Hoover Dam. Sabotage by Soviet agent Sergei Tarasov causes the convoy transporting Megatron to crash, resulting in damage to the cooling systems that allow the Decepticon leader to thaw out. Thomas Kinnear and Philip Nolan sacrifice their lives to ensure he is refrozen and successfully delivered to the Hoover Dam. The second American manned moon landing is carried out in November 1969 to continue excavation and research of the remains of the Ark. 1970s. From 1970 to 72, the United States stages 3 further manned missions to the moon to continue plundering the Ark. Incensed over his failure to stop the Apollo 11 mission, Soundwave has ravaged scout for viable agents within the American space program to make contact with a NASA accountant by the name Gould. By tapping the stock market to provide Gould with all the money he desires, Soundwave procures his services to manipulate the NASA budget and makes further moon missions financially unfeasible. Consequently, the sixth and final mission, launched in December 1972, is deemed the last as the astronauts trigger explosives to hide the wreck of the Ark beneath lunar dust. Also in 1972, Soundwave employs his Soviet agents to ensure that the first Russian manned mission is cancelled. Soundwave spends the remainder of the decade manipulating his pawns and recruiting more and more human agents in various areas of the American and Soviet government to ensure the Ark is never rediscovered. Continuing their use of Shockwave's technology to further their nuclear agenda, the Soviet Union spent most of the decade creating the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The United States also continue with the construction of more nuclear facilities, including the 3 Mile Island power plant. A botched experiment with the energy of the Allspark at this facility on March 28, 1979, leads to a partial core meltdown. That same year, the Witwicky home in Springfield, Missouri, is sold by Clarence Witwicky's son Herbert, and proceeds to share between his daughter and 5 sons, including Ben and Ronald. Also in 1979, content that his plans to keep the Ark concealed are solid, Soundwave elects to return the Nemesis and consult with the Fallen. He convenes with Gould to inform him of his departure and meets Gould's son Dylan, who will eventually take over his father's position as Decepticon liaison. Soundwave's crew depart Earth aboard the Longshot, save for the bumbling space case who is left behind on Earth with no space bridge to teleport them. Their journey takes over a decade. 1980. Unmanned probes are sent by the Soviet Union to the moon, where they uncover the remains of the Ark and return to Earth with a fuel cell salvaged from the ship's engine. The cell is experimented upon at Chernobyl, leading to a catastrophic nuclear incident on April 26, 1986. 1990s. Sam Witwicky is born to Ronald and Judy Witwicky. The Soviet Union collapses in 1991. Knowledge of the captive Shockwave slips between the cracks. No digital records of his existence are kept, and the paper trail is lost in the chaos of the regime's fall, so he remains frozen and forgotten in Siberia. Sometime around 1993, the Longshot completes its return journey to the resting place of the Nemesis. Soundwave presents the Fallen with one of the space bridge pillars, and then is informed of Megatron's visit during his pursuit of the Allspark. Realizing that Megatron must be one of the imprisoned Cybertronians learned of on Earth, Soundwave immediately departs a return journey to the planet. He has most of his crew put in stasis for the trip. After Soundwave leaves, the Fallen activates the space bridge pillar, sundering space and time and finally liberating himself from his sarcophagus prison. In 1998, Jetfire takes advantage of the SR-71 Blackbird's retirement from service to hole up in the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum and goes back into stasis in vehicle mode. Around the end of the decade, either back at Cybertron or elsewhere in space, the Autobot Tailgate is murdered by the Decepticon Reverb. 2003 to 2007. Having followed a new lead on the Allspark's whereabouts, Bumblebee returns to Earth's solar system and briefly touches down on Mars, where the Hubble Space Telescope captures an image of his arrival. Designating him as NBE-2, Sector 7 tracks him to his landing site in Virginia, but the Autobot scout avoids capture by adopting a local alternate mode. Discovering the history of Archibald Witwicky via the internet, Bumblebee sets out to track down the man's descendants. Hot on Bumblebee's trail, Starscream's nemesis arrives on Mars, where an encounter with the Beagle 2 rover prompts Starscream to lead a small group on the rover's planet of origin. Making planetfall in Afghanistan, the group attacks a local military base where they learn of Sector 7's Project Iceman. In the course of the brief battle, Wreckage is disabled by an electromagnetic pulse, and after burying his body, the remaining Decepticons disseminate in disguise to carry out their quest. While tracking Archibald Witwicky's descendants across the country, Bumblebee clashes with Sector 7 agents led by Seymour Simmons and the Decepticons, before finally tracking the Witwicky lineage to Sam, who has inherited his great-grandfather's glasses, along with the secret of the Allspark printed on them. Left to his own devices on Mars, along with Hardtop and the rest of Starscream's Nemesis crew, Thundercracker spends his time exploring the solar system. He discovers the Ark on Earth's moon and recovers the space bridge pillar, which he modifies using know-how gained from studying under the Decepticon Man scientist Flatline. The result device is not quite a true space bridge, but allows the user to follow the passage traveled by the Ark, enabling instantaneous transit from Mars back to Cybertron. Obviously, after this, the events of the first movie, simply titled Transformers, happens. If you've seen it as many times as I have, you know what happens in the movie. But there are some things that lead up to that really awesome first time we see a Transformer on screen in live action, which is Blackout's attack on the Soxent Forward Operations Base in Qatar. What happens is that in 2007, Wreckage Bodies is recovered from its desert resting place by Sector 7 and brought to their Nevada base for experimentation. Reactivated by the organization, Wreckage trades information for his survival and provides Sector 7 with the means to create their LM-1 drones, but is taken offline when he declines to cooperate any farther and attempts to escape. 1 month later, Blackout returns to Afghanistan where he shoots down a military helicopter and takes his form. Yeah, that leads to the base attack in the movie, and then the events of the movie happen. That's all I have to say, so if you want to add to the conversation, leave a comment below. As always, thanks for listening, and goodbye.